Didn't know me. Yeah, she's a college professor. Yeah, 35 years. Today, I have with me David Thibeau. David is the commander for the American Legion Post 44 in El Butte, New Mexico. David, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm going to learn a lot about you in a few minutes. So, okay. A little bit about your life. Where were you born? When? So forth.
I was born in 1948 in a little town in northern Wisconsin, Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. I was raised in southern Wisconsin.
Okay.
That's about it.
And where'd you go to school?
I went to school in Racine, Wisconsin. Went to grade school, graduated from high school there. And
Okay. After graduate, were you employed while attending high school, doing any kind of jobs like delivering newspapers? Something
yeah, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I started out delivering newspapers. I peddled ice cream in these peddled. There were ice cream boxes in the front.
Right.
And you had to peddle them. I did that in the summertime, and all through high school, I worked in a bakery, and I worked as an upholsterer. And I worked those jobs until I got a full-time job after high school.
You did all this during high school?
Yes.
Okay, 3 or 4 jobs.
Yes.
Now, you know, I was a delivery boy like you were in New York City.
Yeah.
And Chuck and I would talk about it. He was living in Governor's Island. But anyway, in Brooklyn, I delivered papers, the Long Island Daily Press. Now, I got more out of delivering newspapers for my future than anything else. Did you have to collect the money because they didn't have a pay by mail?
I did. I had to collect the money once a week.
Right.
And you go pay your bill for the papers that you owed the publishing company.
Did you learn a lot about collecting money?
Oh, I sure did.
About people?
I was 12 years old when I
Yes,
knew to.
same with me. It was 12 when I started.
You want to watch your money?
Yeah. People knocking on the door, you hear shuffling, and no one comes to the door.
You learn to make change real well.
Yeah. Okay. I must say the 4 years I delivered papers, it carried with me and might have helped me be what I am. Anyway, you joined the military, and tell us, what made you join the military? What made you decide to go into the military?
Well, obviously, with my age, it was during the Vietnam era, and right after high school, within 18 months, I had to go take a physical for the draft, and I had a cousin who I respected. He was like an older brother to me, and he had been in the Air Force, and as soon as he found out that I had to go take my physical, he said, "You're going to get drafted. It's going to be soon." And he said, "If I were you, I would go join the Air Force or the Navy, because you can get an education out of it, and you might have a better chance of survival."
Right. He was right.
That's the way I'll put it. And so I went down and took the test for the Air Force, and I wanted to get in on a delayed enlistment program. Most of the people that were being drafted before the lottery was you were 19 usually, and I was already turning 20. Okay. So, but he said, "You're going to get drafted, and it'll be very soon." So I just I went over and took the test, but I didn't take any action. So lo and behold, I got a draft notice, and
You did get drafted.
I did. I got drafted into the U.S. Army, and my induction date was supposedly, I think it was July 7th, 1969. And so my cousin said, "Go down to the recruiter, the Air Force recruiter, and see what he can do." So I went to the Air Force recruiter, and he said, "Yeah, we can get you in, but you gotta go in before your induction date. And so I signed some papers and joined the Air Force that day. 3 days later, I left.
Okay, and what was your induction date to be drafted?
It was
A few months
July
later.
7th, 1969.
A few months
When I
later.
was- No, that's when I was supposed to go in. So on June 28th,
A month.
1969,
Okay,
I was in the Air Force.
okay.
And I got on an airplane for Blackburn Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
So you actually, you could have done that and joined another service prior to you being your induction date, which you did, right?
Which I did.
Okay,
yeah,
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know either,
Yeah,
but I
okay.
thought I was going to the Army for sure.
You weren't like Rick Biller, where he was 11 Bravo in the Army. He was a frontline troop. So yeah, okay, I got you. I didn't know you could do that. I joined at 17. My parents signed for me,
Oh, did
and I was in the Army. It's 2 weeks after I turned 17.
Yeah.
But there's a story behind it because when I got out, first I got a notice from the government saying I haven't ever registered, and I was in trouble. I've been in the Army 3 years. I got discharged.
Really?
But anyway, I went and got it straight, but I never registered. I was military too. Anyway, let me go on. How'd you feel prior to going in to basic training? I mean, to hear you, this is kind of what were your feelings?
During the Vietnam era, somewhat apprehensive. I had friends of mine that had already gone to Vietnam.
Right.
Some of them returned, some of them
Yeah,
didn't.
I bet.
Some of them, a real good friend of mine who came back with one leg and one arm.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had a lot of thoughts, just like a
So
lot
you had
of
a lot
other
of
young
thoughts.
men did, you know, that you could possibly not survive,
Sure.
for sure.
Have you ever left home prior to this for any length of time? Most kids have.
Just for vacations, yeah, I've gone for a couple of vacations, but south of Wisconsin, but I'd never been west of the Mississippi River. I'd never been on an aircraft,
Yeah. Ever.
ever, not in my life. So. And,
Okay, you're heading to Lackland Air Force Base. It's in Texas,
in San
right?
Antonio, yeah.
Okay. What were your memories about, besides anything you mentioned? Well, you kind of mentioned your feelings already, so let's skip that.
Well,
Your
all I
first
can
day-
say about my feelings about San Antonio in July,
Hot.
it was very hot and humid, the hottest weather I think I'd ever put up with. And that's why I did basic training.
Your first day in the military. Tell me about it. What do you remember? Your first day. I'm sure you were shell shocked or something.
Yeah, we got into the barracks way late at night, and got put in the bunk. And the very next morning, we got up, had no idea what was going to happen. I think we got in there at 1 o'clock in the morning. Took a bus from the airport.
Right.
And got us in there at, 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were up at 5.
You've never probably been up that early, have you?
Oh, I'd been up
Oh, really?
plenty, because I'd worked in a full-time job before I was in the military.
Okay.
So, anyway, got up and did what everybody else did, marched down and got a haircut, and issued uniforms and stuff like that.
Kind of taken aback and a little frightened of what was going on. I guess.
Yeah, we were,
You were 19
young
then?
kids, 19, or I think I was 20.
Yep. Okay. All right. So when did you complete basic training?
I don't remember the date, but we were in basic training for, I think, 2.5, 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Then you went to advanced training.
My
What
next
was your training?
job, while I was trained to be I went to school, an aircraft school in Wichita Falls, Texas, at Shepherd Air Force Base.
What was the aircraft? What maintenance?
I was trained to be a crew chief on an F-4 or an F-100.
Oh, okay.
I could accrue either plane. And at that time, my career field in those two was to flying both of them in Vietnam.
Yeah. They were,
And if you were a crew chief on one of those, you were going to Southeast Asia.
at the F4 was one of the, I was on the ground, and F4 was very famous,
Oh, yeah.
very, very proficient airplane. and had a lot of armament on it too, armament, weapons, and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You left advanced training. Where'd you go next?
Got stationed at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
And there were 21 of us who graduated in that class from Shepherd Air Force Base to be trained as crew chiefs. And we had on-the-job training at Kirtland. And I think that lasted for about 6 months before people started getting orders for Southeast Asia. There were 21 of us that came there, and only 3 of us didn't get orders for Vietnam or somewhere in Southeast Asia. There were 3 of us that didn't get orders, and I was one of the 3. I didn't serve in Vietnam.
Okay, where did you serve then?
I served the rest of my term in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Kirtland Air Force Base, and I was discharged from there.
Okay, you were there like 4 years, I guess?
Well, I got an early out from President Nixon,
Okay.
and the reason why I did that basically was unless I was going to make a career in the military after I didn't get orders for Southeast Asia, I couldn't get any more promotions or anything stateside, and I would have had to re-up for another 6 years in order to get another promotion. And at the time, I didn't feel I wanted.
So that's what brought you to New Mexico from, what was it? You were living in Wisconsin?
Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what brought me to New Mexico.
That was your
Sure
connection.
did.
Okay, you really liked the state.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Tell me, okay, you were in Albuquerque Station, Kirtland?
Kirtland, yes.
Okay, tell us about, what was the base like and what did you do off duty and so forth? Just curious.
I didn't do much off duty. I got, at the time I got married and brought my wife down to Albuquerque. There was no base housing available at that time. And we lived off base, my wife and I. My daughter was born in Albuquerque, so she's a native. And that's about it.
Okay.
We just,
So you were a married man while you were in the
I was a married man.
Yeah, okay.
I got married shortly after
Okay.
going to the service.
And what year did your service end, actually?
1973.
Okay. All right.
War in Vietnam started descaling down by that time, and President Nixon offered early outs for some people, and it was 4 months. And
Wasn't a whole lot, just 4 months.
No, 4 months, that's all it was.
Okay.
So I was in the military for 3 years, 8 months, and 5 days, I think.
If I recall, I went to Nam in '68, got back in '69, and Rick probably remembers this. We spent a year there, at least that was the tour of the Army. At that point in 68, 69, 70, the war was at its highest. We had 500,000 troops there. In fact, we have more troops there than there are in the military now, totally just in Nam. That year, around 73, the war was starting to come down.
Right.
75, it's officially kind of over. So that's why you got the early out.
Yeah.
Because they knew we were pulling out. So, okay, of your entire service, David, of your entire service career, what is the most memorable that stands out that you always think about? What would you say? Good or bad? Whatever.
The good thing, as far as the work goes, certainly my outfit, we serviced airplanes from all over the country. We were a transient alert, and I worked with Marine aircraft, Navy aircraft, Luftwaffe aircraft, of course, the United States Air Force. But Albuquerque was one of the spots where they would refuel when they'd in-flight refuel from other bases, and halfway across the United States they'd have to, and from Southeast Asia basically, because some of these aircraft would come in and they'd have the fighter aircraft, F-4s and F-100s, and they'd come in and they had to go get rebuilt in different places in the country, and there was bullet holes in them and sticks,
So you've seen all this.
Oh yeah.
The after effect.
Yeah, well, they'd refuel here and they'd fly them out to rebuilding facilities, refurbishing facilities. And at Kirtland in those days, we turned around 10,000 airplanes a year. So we were busy.
Did you have a hard time adjusting from the military back to civilian life? Did you find them awkward? Or give me a impression.
What I felt when I first got out, of course, during the drafting time, when I got drafted, they didn't have these lottery numbers. Unless you were enrolled in school, in college, you were gonna get drafted. And so some of my friends did that, and they were 4 years later, they had degrees, and it just seemed like they were 4 years ahead of me. And I did feel that, and that's what I still feel today. That they got a jump on me, but it didn't take long.
Well, because they went in the
They
college.
already had their education and everything, and I had to come back and pretty much start over.
They didn't go to the military, did they?
No.
Because they had these deferments.
They had deferments, and they never served.
Right. You know, I had a good friend of mine from Brooklyn, and we departed when I went in the Army. I'd seen him for many years, and Rick probably knows what I'm talking about too. He told me that during the era, which I went in on at 17, if you were married at one point, you were deferred. Well, he got married. I mean, it was his girlfriend that had been dating him, so he got married for that purpose. And then there was a point where if you had one child, you got a deferment. He had a child.
Really?
I mean, it was like it's time to have a child. And then they changed it another year or two later. And if you had 2 children, really. Yeah. And then it was one point if you had college. So he went and got his associate degree. And he had it all. He had a system there, but he never went in the military. And he was a good friend of mine. I kind of felt bad at some point, saying, "Wow, he beat the system pretty good." But we all know that happened, and that's the way it is. Okay, look, you ended up. I mean, you're the commander of the American Legion post. What did you do after the military to kind of get where you're at? I'm sure you.
I went back to Wisconsin, lived in Wisconsin for approximately 3 years.
After you left.
After I got discharged from the military, I went back to Wisconsin, went to work, got divorced from my first wife, spent 3 years there, and decided I fell in love with the mountains and I had to come back.
What kind of work did you go into?
I was, before I went in the military, I was about almost 2 years into an apprenticeship program to become a journeyman machinist.
Okay.
And I had to finish that. So when I came back, and this was a good thing about the federal laws at the time, the employer, if you were employed before you went in, they were supposed to take you back. So I went back to the job that I left, and the guys said, "Oh, geez." Some of them said, "Where have you been?" I said, "What do you mean, where have I been? I've been in the military for almost 4 years." And they said, "Well, welcome back." And so I got my job back, and they welcomed me back with open arms, got my job back, and finished my training. And,
did you use the VA for anything?
While I was in the service, I took a correspondence course in HVAC.
Oh.
And that's what I was going to do when I got out. But as coming out with, contrary to what people think, a lot of civilians at the time thought that people in the service hadn't made. We made a lot of money. Well, that was totally untrue. And we didn't make a lot of money, and so when I found out what my employer would take me back with all the raises and my seniority and everything, it was a no-brainer. I mean, I went back to work for them because I had to support my wife and the child.
So when you went back to Wisconsin, you went to work as a machinist, basically?
Yes.
And then you ended up back in New Mexico.
I did. I ended up back out here, and I went to work as a machinist, and they had me do hydraulic work also.
And lead us up to your involvement with the American Legion.
Well, we lived in my second wife and I, Martha, we got married in 1978, and we lived in Albuquerque in a couple of different locations, and then we ended up in the East Mountain area. We lived up there for 31 or 32 years, and we started vacationing in the wintertime since we lived at 7,000 feet.
Right.
When we get tired of shoveling snow, we brought our RV down to Elephant Butte. And we ended up spending considerable time in Elephant Butte for 3 seasons.
I can see
We
why.
ended up buying a house. So during that time, I was introduced to some people that were members of the American Legion, and they invited me over for social gatherings and stuff. And first thing you know, I was volunteering there, and then I became an officer, and eventually became commander.
Well, so how long you been the commander?
In October, it'll be 2 years.
2 years. That's an elected position, right?
Well, it is, but unfortunately, for most of the, what happened with me is a fellow passed away in office, and he was the first vice commander.
Oh, okay.
And I was asked by the commander at that time if I would be interested in being elected for his post. So there's a formulation that the executive committee can elect somebody to fill out the unexpired term. So that's what I did for first vice. And then for the commander's position, that happened again. Here I was first vice, and the commander at the time phoned me and he said, "I'm sick, I can't do it anymore." So it was my responsibility to step up as commander, and I did so. And since then, he has passed on.
Wow.
And
Sorry.
because we are a retirement community,
Yes.
and we're mostly older people.
Both TRC and LTC.
Yes, and then of course during the COVID, we couldn't have nominations and elections, so we had to go that whole year to 15 months, whatever it is now. And so I'm still here, and I hope to be here for a while.
Very good. Well, my last question: What do you wish more people would know about veterans and what they went through? What would you say?
Number one, what I'd like to know is that most veterans carry something with them from the military, whether it be bad memories, good memories, wounds. We all carry something. A lot of the things that I remember are positive, because most of my friends that were in Vietnam, they came back. And I remember one thing in particular, the training instructor that I had in boot camp. Of all the things to remember, I remember his patriotism.
Yeah.
And,
Sergeant.
yeah, I think he was a tech sergeant,
Okay.
and he was the training instructor. And he took some shrapnel in Vietnam during combat. I think I've never asked him what he did, but he had to have something in the combat role. And but he was very proud. He took some shrapnel here in the neck. And he didn't speak as well as he used to, but he would always, every time we marched or anything like that, if you saw him, and he'd have a tear in his eye when he did the Pledge of Allegiance.
Really?
And I never forgot.
That's patriotism.
I never forgot that.
Yeah, I know. Every time I say the pledge, I get that. I think about all the things that I've been through, and my associates have been through, and it's more to it than just looking at a piece of cloth. Well, look, David, I appreciate your spending some time with us on this interview. It's great hearing all this information. Thank you for your service and your dedication to being the commander of the American Legion Post 44.
It's my honor. Thank you. Thank you.